Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and here on YouTube at Hawk Blogger. And good morning to you on this Monday morning of Combine Week. I am on my way to the airport immediately following this show, so we're going to make this one a good, tight, chock full of info show, and then I will see you on the other side in Indianapolis. Got a great week of coverage ahead. I will inform you guys each and every day of the schedule and what we're going to see, starting with tomorrow, bright and early, at least on the West Coast, 10 a.m. I will be at the John Schneider press conference, and then the following day, a bunch of the player press conferences start, and then Mike McDonald is at 1 o'clock, not to mention a bunch of other coaches and general managers having their availability. So who knows? There's going to be a ton of stuff going on, and cannot wait. Thank you to everybody who has already upgraded their subscription over at patreon.com/hawkblogger, who has become a YouTube member, who has sent me, just a tip over on Venmo at Brian-Nemhauser. All of it is greatly appreciated. If you guys could see how much equipment I have purchased and I'm going to be lugging to Indianapolis, not to mention trying to make sure I help cover some of the costs for Nathan Ernst, who's coming out here. Appreciate all the support. So thank you guys. And to that note, Luke Allen, welcome as a YouTube member. It's great to have you, Luke. Thank you for being here. So yeah, good morning to everybody. I'm excited. I hope you are as well. Something I've been working on in the background for a while is this notion of controversial prospects. And, I tried to figure out the right word for it, but there's some prospects where there's some unanimity, some consensus about where they are on the draft board. There's other prospects where there's quite a bit of disparity. And I wanted, before we headed into the combine, for my own needs, but also just for all of yours, to kind of identify which are the players that have the most consensus and which are the players that have the least consensus among draft experts that I respect. And so, not everybody releases their top 50. And so I can't say that this is every draft expert that I respect for sure. But the three that I chose to focus on were Dane Brugler, who's of course a guest on the show, and I hope to see Dane this week, Trevor Sikkema over at PFF, and then Daniel Jeremiah. And so some of them have more than their top 50. I am focusing on just who are in their top 50. So caveat there. There could be some names on this list where there's bigger disparity because maybe somebody else has them down at 100. I did not pull in all of that data. I'm just comparing who they have in their 50 and who within those 50 exist in each of their 50 lists, and where the biggest gaps were in that group. So going to be going through that in a second. Make sure you give the show a like and click subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. So with no further ado, let's get right to it. I'm curious, who do you think has the biggest gap between the top 50 of Trevor Sikkema, Dane Brugler, and Daniel Jeremiah? Who would you guess has the biggest gap? Do you think it is Travis Hunter? Probably not. And you'd be right, because Travis Hunter is one of the guys that there's the least amount of disagreement on. Travis Hunter is either number 1 or number 2 in each of these guys. Brugler has him as 1. Sikkema has him as 1. Daniel Jeremiah has him as 2. Abdul Carter, similarly. Brugler, Sikkema have him, Abdul Carter, at 2. Daniel Jeremiah has him as 1 on his top 50. So, with that little bit of opportunity for delay, who do you think is the top? We have some guesses in here. Jalen Walker, Booker, Pierce. Yeah, some good guesses in there. There is a tie. There is a tie at the top. The number 1 of these 3 difference makers is Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders shows up, the highest that he shows up is number 11 on Daniel Jeremiah's top 50. He is 25 on Dane Brugler's. He is all the way down at 42 on Trevor Sikkema's list. And I'll be honest, folks, for me, I am most aligned with Trevor Sikkema on this one. And there's people that asked me on Twitter yesterday, if Shedeur Sanders falls to 18, do you take him? I don't know that I do, because I'm just not convinced that there's a big enough gap between Shedeur Sanders and the guys that you could get on day 2 to justify two things: the price of a first round contract. Well, three things: the price of a first round contract, the commitment to him being your starting quarterback. You draft a quarterback in the first round, you are committing to giving him a chance to be your starter. And 3, the opportunity cost of not taking a defensive lineman or not taking an offensive lineman in the first round. For me, I just don't think he's worth it. I haven't seen enough from him. I don't think his arm is strong enough. Personally, I understand why some people might say, hey, he doesn't have to throw at the combine. He's had plenty of time in college playing. People can see him on the field. There's a lot of guys that are played a lot in college and they're going to be thrown at the combine. And one of the question marks with Shedeur Sanders is his arm strength. And I know a lot of folks who were looking forward to seeing Shedeur Sanders throw at the same time in the same situation as other quarterbacks, so they could kind of see how the ball comes off his hand compared to these other guys. And knowing that that's a question mark, Shedeur Sanders has chosen not to throw at the combine. And look, if there's a team that has guaranteed him that he will not fall below them in the top 10, I get it. I think that's a little early for someone to make that commitment. But if they did, fine. Otherwise, it's a pretty big red flag to me that Shedeur Sanders is only going to throw at his pro day and that he is going to not compete at the combine on the field. I think that doesn't really demonstrate the spirit, I think, of what you'd want in a guy who's an alpha at the quarterback position. I'll tell you one thing. I don't think Josh Allen, I don't think a lot of these guys would have declined the opportunity to show off if they had something to show off. So I know people say, well, Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams didn't throw last year. Those guys were in a totally different league of prospect. And as you can see by him being one of the most controversial prospects in this draft, that remains the case here with Shedeur Sanders. He is a different level of prospect than Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels or a lot of the guys that went last year. All right, so Shedeur Sanders, one of the biggest gaps from 11 on Daniel Jeremiah to 42 on Trevor Sikkema's list. All right, but I told you there was a 3-way tie at the top. And some of you guessed the second guy on that list, Tyler Booker. Tyler Booker is as high as 14 on Daniel Jeremiah's top 50. He is 18 on Dane Brugler's, so they're pretty similar. Trevor Sikkema has him all the way down at 45. So far, the difference between Daniel Jeremiah and Trevor Sikkema has been what has been the biggest difference between these. We'll see if that stands throughout the rest of these guys that I go through. But this is a guy that a lot of Seahawks fans have as maybe their top guy that they want Seattle to take. I know Rob Staten has been banging the drum on him from the get-go. I have been maybe the slowest to come around to him. I still have real questions about Tyler Booker from a zone blocking perspective. When you look at Tyler Booker last year as a zone blocking guard, he doesn't rank very well. And so I have some concerns about making your first pick, 18th overall, a guy that doesn't really excel at the scheme that you are going to be doing a lot of work in. So that's a concern I have with Tyler Booker. What has gotten me over the hump with Tyler Booker is less about his on-field play, which I think is great. He did a great breakdown with Brandon Thorne, friend of the show. If you have not seen Brandon Thorne's, you should check it out, his interview with Tyler Booker. but also that he is just, Daniel Jeremiah has talked about how much he's set the tone in the room. And so for me, I think that that's a huge, huge opportunity for kind of setting the tone in the locker room for the offensive lineman. Having a guy that's that kind of natural leader, I think could be a really good addition. But to put a number to what I'm talking about on the zone blocking side, out of 199 offensive guards last year, Tyler Booker ranked 122nd in zone blocking. So you got to be careful there. You got to be careful there, but I think part of the reason as well that you probably have Trevor Sikkema a little lower is he's a pure guard. He does not have tackle flexibility, and that's why for me he is still not in the top 3 of the offensive linemen that I'd want the Seahawks to select, but he is someone that I would be very excited if the Seahawks did pick. All right, so that is the second guy who's tied for most controversial. We've had Shedeur Sanders, Tyler Booker. There's one more. Let's see if anybody's got any guesses on who thinks is the most controversial. I'll give you one more second. I will give you a clue. This is a guy that also is high on Rob Staten's list. Who do you think it is? It starts with a J. The initials are JB. What's going on here? All right, it is Jahdae Barron. He is as high as 9 on Daniel Jeremiah's list. Top 10 for Daniel Jeremiah. He is 30th for Trevor Sikkema, so a big jump there. But for Dane Brugler, he is 40th. So Daniel Jeremiah and Dane Brugler see Jahdae Barron extremely differently. And if you listen to Daniel Jeremiah's pre-combine press conference, what he told you was that he sees Jahdae Barron as like a Brian Branch, as a Devin Witherspoon, as, you know, maybe a Mike Sainristil, like one of these guys that plays in the middle, can play in the middle of the field, is maybe a little bit undersized, and that the NFL continues to undervalue and allow to slip to second round. It didn't happen with Devin Witherspoon, but happened with Brian Branch. And so this is a guy that Daniel Jeremiah sees as a major difference maker. Dane Brugler, not so much. He's got him all the way down at 40. So those are the 3 guys: Shedeur Sanders, Tyler Booker, and Jahdae Barron, who is a cornerback, safety, nickelback kind of guy, who have the biggest disparity in how people see him. And I see people saying Jahdae may be higher on Trevor Sikkema's board now. Now, I took this a couple of days ago, and it's very likely that Trevor Sikkema has updated since then. Cannot promise that this is the most up to date, but these are absolutely, he was here at some point on that board. All right. So that was the top tier, the tie at the top. The next most controversial is a guy that we haven't talked a lot about. He is a cornerback out of Notre Dame, has dealt with some injury, and his name is Benjamin Morrison. He is number 16 on Trevor Sikkema's top 50. He is number 45 on Daniel Jeremiah's. He's not listed on Dane Brugler's. So a pretty huge disparity there for Benjamin Morrison. And in fact, if you were to count the fact that he doesn't even show up on Dane Brugler's, he becomes the most controversial. He has a bigger gap than the guys that currently list as number 1. So Benjamin Morrison's dealt with some injury. Not everybody's on the same page of this guy. Going to be interested to see where he ends up as they get closer and closer, and people get to see a little bit more about his medicals, especially at the combine. All right. Similarly, the next guy on the list, Jihad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. He is number 13 on Daniel Jeremiah's list. He's number 23 on Dane Brugler's. He's 41 on Trevor Sikkema's. So a big difference there, again, between Daniel Jeremiah sees a lot of these guys a little bit higher than the other two. So Jihad Campbell's another big controversial player, a guy that a lot of people think can not only play inside linebacker, but also can be a edge rusher if you want him in nickel downs. So interesting to see the differing opinions there. Right behind him, another guy that you've heard a lot about, this guy from Georgia, safety Malachi Starks. He is 7th on Trevor Sikkema's board. He is 14th on Dane Brugler's board. He is 33rd on Daniel Jeremiah's board. So this is a guy that Trevor Sikkema and Dane Brugler like a lot more than Daniel Jeremiah. He's a guy that's, a true safety. He can play a little bit in the nickel, but is, for some people, the best safety in the draft. There's some good competition. I've seen some other people. Matt Miller just came out with his top 50. I didn't have a chance to drop this in here. He has Nick Amanawari as his top safety. So that would have been a big difference there. After Malachi Starks, this one's interesting. I did not expect there to be this much controversy with Colston Loveland. But Daniel Jeremiah has him as 7th. He has 2 tight ends in his top 7. He's got Tyler Warren at 5. He's got Colston Loveland at 7. Brugler's got Loveland at 11. So they're pretty similar. Sikkema has him at 31. So a big difference there on the tight end from Michigan, who a lot of people are like, hey, I'd love to have him in Seattle. My concern with Colston Loveland and why he's not really on my board is I don't see him as a blocker. I see him as a big receiver. I see him split out a lot. I don't think it's a fit for what Clint Kubiak's going to do in Seattle. I already think they've got an issue with Noah Fant as someone who is a limited blocker in this scheme, who I'd like to see them move on from. I think Colston Loveland is cut from the same cloth, and I think that he's not a great fit. So for me, I don't think he is anywhere near worth the draft capital you'd have to spend to draft him for this team, because I just think fit is off. This is not saying he's going to be a bad player. I think he could be a fantastic pick for like the Denver Broncos, who are looking for a Joker-like player. I don't think that he's a good fit for Seattle. All right. I got some super chats here. Colin Lundstrom. Hey, Colin. He says, just saying hey to the HB family. Been out sick a long while. Glad to tune back in. Well, great to see you, Colin, and thank you. Hopefully you are feeling better. I know I am really hoping I don't get sick on this trip. I've gotten sick on pretty much every trip lately, although going to Palm Springs, I'll know. Maybe I just need to go to Palm Springs all the time. I did not get sick there. Looking back, I think I saw somebody who echoed Big Ray Roberts' perspective. Where did it show up? This was way back. This was someone who was basically saying, I don't want somebody who can play multiple positions. I don't value that. And I can't find out exactly where that comment. Oh, there it is. Ben Baller says, I don't want flexibility. I want to talk on this for a second, and I'll get back to some of the controversial names. What I'd say is Ray Roberts feels this pretty strongly. He feels like the Seahawks have made a lot of mistakes. He's been vocal about it. Drafting a tackle and switching him to guard or to center or this, that, or the other. Couple things. I don't think that you can just look at what the Seahawks have done and say that it's representative of the league. So if you look at the Eagles, you look at almost every team, they have guys that on the offensive line can play multiple positions or have switched. Mekhi Becton, great example this year. They took him, who was a highly drafted tackle, and they moved him to guard, and he blew up. He's going to be one of the top free agents this year. There's benefit in identifying what the strengths of a player are and playing them at that spot. I would also say that there's a big difference between a guy that played tackle in college and looks like they are capable of being a tackle in the pros, who can also play guard, and a guy who played tackle in college, but there's no way he's going to hold up at tackle in the pros and is really just a guard and a guard conversion. I am most interested when I talk about Armand Membu, or I talk about, Will Campbell, or I talk about, to a lesser extent, Kelvin Banks, but I think he can hold up at right tackle. But Membu and Campbell, I think they can be really good right tackles in the NFL. I also think they can be Pro Bowl, maybe all pro guards. That's a big difference. Last thing I'd say there, maybe it's the last thing, is if you look at the players the Seahawks have drafted that have been just one position players, I don't think that's been a cure-all either. I don't think Christian Haynes had a terrific season as a rookie last year. I don't think Olu Oluwatimi has had his first 2 years have been outstanding as a center-only player. And he was an Outland Trophy winner, like the best center in college football, the best lineman in college football. So I don't think it's some kind of cure-all to just draft players that only play one position on the offensive line. What I really like about tackles that are really legitimate tackles that also have the body type to move to guard is that if they've been able to pass protect effectively on the edge, their athletic ability on the inside has a lot of upside to it, a higher ceiling. And that's one of my concerns a little bit about Tyler Booker, but Armand Membu is a great example. There's other people that have been saying to me, I think we should move Abe Lucas to guard. Abe Lucas is not built like a guard. He is high cut. He looks like a tackle. He should play tackle. He is healthy as far as anything we know about him. So I think Abe Lucas is a good right tackle. I think you're not getting the best of Abe Lucas by moving him to guard. So I think that finding a guy that can play tackle, if Abe Lucas does not pan out, but that his primary position you're drafting him to play as guard, is the best way to go. If you can get one of those guys who's a legitimate tackle, but you see him as a great guard, and all you're going to work him out to be in Seattle is a guard, unless Abe Lucas gets hurt, and then you have options. I think that's a very solid strategy, and I don't think there's any problem with having some of that flexibility. All right, let's get back to it. Talked about Colston Loveland. Next, we have a three-way tie. The first on this list is an edge rusher we have not spent a lot of time talking about. He had a huge play in the college football playoffs. Plays for Ohio State. His name is Jack Sawyer. He is 22 on Trevor Sikkema's list. He is 40th on Daniel Jeremiah's. He is 44th on Dane Brugler. So this is a place where Sikkema and Brugler don't see eye to eye. For what it's worth, I am closer to Brugler on this. I think Jack Sawyer is a pretty limited athlete. I think if you want kind of that strong edge, that style of edge, I think Landon Jackson is a better option for you. I think he's a better option for the Seahawks. But I think Jack Sawyer, there's a chance that he has a lower ceiling as an edge rusher. So the fact that Sikkema's got him so high is interesting, but not where I am. Tied with Sawyer for differences in opinion, controversial aspects, Luther Burden. Now, this is a guy that a couple months ago was consistently mocked in the top 12. Everybody had him mocked very high. Trevor Sikkema still has him as 10th on his list. He is 20th on Dane Brugler's. He is 32nd on Daniel Jeremiah's. Daniel Jeremiah barely has a first-round grade on him. Well, at least first in terms of 32 picks. A lot of these guys only have 10 or 12 first round grades, maybe even less. But in any event, Luther Burden, the receiver, is a guy that is an interesting player for the Seahawks. A lot of run after the catch, physical receiver. For a while, didn't seem like he'd be available at 18. Seems like a lot of times now he might be available at 18, but may not be the right pick for the Seahawks, especially after the conversation we had with Griff Sturgeon of Seattle Overload yesterday of how much 21 and 12 personnel he thinks that's going to be on the field and how few three receiver sets you're going to play and how often that third receiver is probably going to be someone like Jake Bobo more than someone like Luther Burden. So Luther Burden is tied with Jack Sawyer for biggest controversy among this group. And then the third, tied with Jack Sawyer, Luther Burden, is Gray Zabel. You have definitely heard that name on this show. He is 26th on Trevor Sikkema's list. He is 38th on Dane Brugler's. He is 48th. Just barely makes the top 50 for Daniel Jeremiah. But Daniel Jeremiah mocked him to the Seahawks at 18 in the most recent draft that he did. So, you know, this is a controversial player. I really like Gray Zabel. This guy is a 5-position player, but I think in the NFL, he's a 3-position and maybe a 2-position player. And I think this is a guy I do believe you really need to know how you want to use him. You don't want to turn it into an Ethan Posick kind of guy who's also drafted to be a 5-position flex guy. He played tackle for the Seahawks. He played guard, eventually got back to center, which was his true position. And he did his best work there. But it was a little too late. They let him go. He goes to Cleveland. He does better in Cleveland than he did in Seattle. I think Gray Zabel has the best upside at center, but I think he can be a great guard in a zone scheme. So I think it really depends on fit, and I think his fit is great. So I think I am probably closer to somewhere between Brugler at 38 and Sikkema at 26. I'd probably have him just outside the first round in the 30s. Between 30 and 40 is about where I have Gray Zabel. And he is one of the more controversial guys. All right, a couple more, and then I'll wrap up here. The next most controversial is Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons, the tackle for Ohio State, left tackle for Ohio State, dealt with injury this year. I see him as a pure tackle. Some people think he can play guard. A lot of people have mocked him to the Seahawks. I don't think that's where I'd want the Seahawks to go. Trevor Sikkema has him at 12th. Dane Brugler at 17th. Daniel Jeremiah down at 30th. Okay, so they all have him relatively high, but a pretty big gap between 12 and 30 between Sikkema and Jeremiah. Tied with Simmons, and the last guy I'm going to mention is another guy that I've mentioned quite a bit, Shamar Stewart. He is number 9 on Dane Brugler's list. He is 20 on Sikkema's list. He is 27th on Jeremiah's list. So Brugler and Jeremiah do not see eye to eye here. I think Brugler is much closer to how Shamar Stewart's going to be seen coming out of the combine. I think he's going to blow the combine away. I think he's going to have a great week. And I think he's going to be a top 10 prospect and probably out of the Seahawks' reach after the combine week. So that is a list of the most controversial prospects heading into the combine. Shedeur Sanders, Tyler Booker, Jahdae Barron, Benjamin Morrison, Jihad Campbell, Malachi Starks, Colston Loveland, Jack Sawyer, Luther Burden, Gray Zabel, Josh Simmons, and Shamar Stewart. If you're curious, the guys that have the least amount of controversy. We talked about basically it's Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are the guys that have the least amount of difference in their rankings. If I look, I'm taking a look at some of these other guys, but those are the ones that really have one spot difference. Another guy that's kind of in that bucket, Azariah Thomas. He's 42nd for Dane Brugler. He's 43rd for Daniel Jeremiah. But he's not listed for Sikkema. So I think, he's a little bit different. He's a little bit. I would really put Hunter and Abdul Carter as the only two that have really very, very similar rankings. All right. I think there was a super chat I missed from Ed Chan. It says, just a preemptive Tylenol contribution. Fingers crossed you won't need it, Brian. Well, thank you, Ed. Appreciate that. All right. Someone had a question about Membu. I will at least take a quick look and I'll let you know where Membu is ranked for these three guys. He is 8th for Brugler. He is 17th for Jeremiah. He is 21st for Sikkema. So, a decent gap, but not a huge gap. And I'm taking a look here to see why he didn't show up in my list. Oh, he did. All right. Yep. Got it. All right. Let me see. I think there was a question. Looking through this list. I know I saw it somewhere. I'm probably missing it. All right. Well, I'm going to get going, get myself some breakfast, get myself finished packing, and head off to the airport. I'm going to give you a ton of coverage coming up this week, so make sure you've clicked like, click subscribe, and we'll see what comes next. You guys probably have as good a guess as I do of what we're going to see this week. So looking forward to it. See you all soon. Have a great rest of your day. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been episode 337? What is it? It's 336 of Hawk Blogger Morning. 336 straight days. Take care, everybody.